Well, hi there, everyone, and welcome to our Her Frame Matters panel. We are here because through the Gender Supportive Wage, which is women and gender equality, this panel will be contributing to the research and protocol guideline of the depiction of women of color on our Canadian screens. And with me today are three fantastic panelists who work on shows with strong women of color in starring roles. Joseph Kay, he's a writer and creator of series television. And prior to creating and executive producing the drama series Transplant for Bell Media and NBC Universal, he served as showrunner for the CBC drama This Life. Previous credits include WW2 drama Bomb Girls for Global TV and CBC's hit action comedy Republic of Doyle. Joseph co-created the single camera comedy Living in Your Car for HBO Canada before becoming a screenwriter. He worked as a transactional lawyer at one of Canada's foremost security law firms. You'll have to tell us the name of that one, Joseph, later. Mary Galloway is an award-winning Cowichan filmmaker, actor, and fierce trailblazer, paving the way for indie queer content creation. Galloway bravely tells stories that represent marginalized communities, and her achievements include being a TIFF Rising Star and a Whistler Film Festival Talent to Watch, a recipient of WIFT Vancouver Newcomer Award, and being named to the Hollywood Reporter list of breakout making an impact on Hollywood. Recently, she wrapped her web series, Querencia, funded by Telefilm's Talent to Watch, APTN, and Bell Fund, and the Indigenous Screen Office. RT, with over 160 music videos, commercials, and short films to his credit, along with 18 filmmaking awards, director RT is one of Canada's most sought-after directors and creators. He has directed for Netflix, Disney, Hulu, and NBC Universal and has earned 2 Canadian Screen Award nominations and a Directors Guild of Canada nomination. In 2016, he was named by Playback as one of the filmmakers to watch. In 2018, Thorne was the recipient of Telefilm's Talent to Watch Fund and was accepted to the prestigious Toronto International Film Festival Talent Lab. He is the creator of Utopia Falls and currently a director and executive producer on The Porter, as well as the chair of the DGC BIPOC committee. Well, folks, that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much. Hope I didn't butcher your bios too badly. But RT, I actually want to start with you.
Sure.
Now, Utopia Falls was your first series project. What was that like as a music video director walking in, and who did you walk into and who did you pitch to, and how were you received?
Well, I mean, I had actually started doing television a few years before this, but it was my first show that I created, so that's for sure. As a director and executive producer, so I mean, the opportunity actually came to me. Like I said, I had done a couple of different series for some people, so I guess my name was kind of floating around, and a company came to me to put together a series. They wanted to do something in the YA space. They knew that coming from sort of music video world, I had, I got a lot of experience, making content for young people, and obviously being a big music fan and all that kind of stuff. So they kind of came, and they were interested in doing something YA and music related, specifically hip hop related. And through a series of conversations, some of the stuff that they had, I didn't find very interesting. So I pitched them on something that I thought would be interesting, which is sort of what would happen. Well, first of all, it was just, what about hip hop culture in the future? I've never heard of that. I've never seen that represented in any futuristic films. Hip hop is sort of the main cultural force in the world today. So it has to evolve. I would love to see what it would be. So I initially pitched them on that concept, and then it sort of, we got more fine-tuned with the idea of if a society exists in the world in the future, that's sort of a utopian society. um, how would they achieve that? What would they do to do that? And in our particular version of the world, they would curate the cultures that are allowed to be part of this utopian society, and they would leave out certain cultures that would not be part of it. And so, of course, hip hop, and quite frankly, any kind of rebellious music, rock, punk, all of that stuff would be left out of this curated world. And what would happen if the teenagers of that world discovered that that had happened, and that certain cultures of the past had been kept away from them, and so they rediscover these cultures
So this production company was they were looking for something and they wanted you to do something. And when you pitched this, were they warmed to it? Did they get it right away?
I will say this for the producers who were in that production company, they actually thought that was really interesting. This kind of idea, and this is well before 2020. This is 2018, 17, before the sort of rise of Black Lives Matter and this sort of cultural revolution that happened. But it was a show that was, that I thought was about protest culture, and it was about understanding the connection between that and musical culture and youth culture and how they all kind of connect. So I think they were interested in it from the beginning as a production company. That said, when we went out to start pitching, there was no one in Canada who was.
Yeah.
That's
the part I want to get to. It's how did you sell it to the green lighters, and
yes.
especially because you have a lead woman of color.
Yes. Both of our leads. The series is led by a mixed race woman of color, but also our second is a black man, is a black young man as well. And in fact, all of our leads in the show, the entire cast of the young people, queer, Indigenous, Latin, and Asian.
But how did I want to know how you got across to them that as a black man, you were going to have the nuance or the understanding to create this character. Did you have to sort of sell that the writing room was going to have this kind of the diversity of these women in it, or how did you pitch that? Because I'm curious about.
Yeah, being a director, especially a black director, especially in this country, I'm used to being one of the only black people on sets. And that's just a reality of what the world is. There might be some people in the catering department. There might be some people in the makeup and hair department. So I'm very aware, when I walk on set, of the difference. So I knew that when I got a chance to create a show and produce a show, I was craving the diversity needed to put it together. And these are the characters I wanted to see, as a young person watching, Star Trek's pretty good, in terms of its representation. It has a history of being half decent in representation, but that actually really inspired me as a young filmmaker. And whenever I wanted to come with my show, I wanted to make sure that faces that I see in my neighborhoods and in where I've been, that they're represented, especially in the future. So when it came to putting together the crew, it wasn't really something I had to pitch. I was like, this is what I need to do it.
Right.
And this is who I want to actually get opportunities to contribute. So, we had a very diverse writing room. And as you can tell, the cast as well. And then we strove to do that on the crew side,
right?
But it was fairly difficult, which is also part of my journey, and that's one of the reasons that I'm now the chair of the BIPOC committee of the Directors Guild of Canada, because it was so difficult to find crew that
And
we
were
could
you able
staff.
to get women on that writing, on your writing staff?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Half our room was female. Yeah, yeah.
No, that's
So
great.
um,
Mary, because your show is just because you're in it, which is fantastic too. So you really brought a lot of who you are as a person to the role and to the story. And when you were pitching it, did that must have added positively to you pitching to the people that are greenlighting, or do you think no, it was just as tough?
Or no, I feel like that maybe took away. They're like, you're gonna be in it and direct it and write it and showrun it. How are you gonna
Who do
do
you
that?
think you are?
Yeah, totally. No, but I've done that a few times for a couple of shorts, and I've worked out a system that I think works really well to be able to kind of juggle the many positions. But I think, like, as far as like writing myself in the story, that definitely helped for sure, because I think when I pitched it, it rang true or like it just like hit people's heartstrings just the way I was hoping it would. And we got it funded through the Imaginative Film Festival's live in-person TIFF Bell Lightbox pitching event, and it was like 4 teams pitching in front of a room full of, this was pre-COVID, 200 industry executives and all that. And so we won the pitch, and so at the like night before the pitch, Jesse, my producer, and I, Jesse Anthony, another Indigenous creator, were like, we had a whole script worked out for the pitch, and we're like, you know what, we just need to throw it away and talk from our hearts and tell the story. We know what we want to say. I think we just need to stop worrying about the exact words we're going to say, and just like, we know we'll start with intros, and then we'll tell the story, and then we'll wrap up with like problems that we might foresee, that how we're going to navigate them and all that. And we're just like, okay, we got the broad strokes, let's just throw out the script and get up there and put our heart in it. And it worked.
You know, I'm so glad that you said that, because I am one of those people that will always say, did those pitches really work? I mean, what reality are you going to have to stand up on stage and pitch to an audience of people? But it sounds like this opened the doors for you. Did you find that, did broadcasters approach you, or were you able to at least call them then, and being able to say you know, done this pitch and then won?
Well, so the award was to get a broadcast license with APTN. So that was like my first door opening to work with a network, and APTN were so incredible to work with. They really let me just do my thing and sit back, and like, we just keep them updated, and they're like, whatever you need, we're here. And then we applied to the last round of Telefilm's web series funding, and we got that through the Canadian Academy, was like our sponsor person, or whatever. And each step of the way, kind of, we had to like re-pitch to new people to get more funding and more funding, and it just sort of snowballed. So it really definitely opened a lot of doors. And now we're changing the second season. We're moving it over to linear television, and making it a half-hour show instead of like 10-minute episodes. And so it's really just like taken off on a life of its own, and it definitely like just opened up a million doors, which I'm so grateful for. And we were up for CSAs this year, my first time ever being nominated for that. And my favorite category is the Audience Choice Award, because that's the people who I feel like I make it for. So it's been such a great journey so far.
No, that's really fantastic. I would say this show is like the first of its kind, because I can't think of another show that's in the Indigenous community that's got queer characters, you know, in this way. And do you feel this sense of responsibility of bringing a really authentic voice to something that could easily have been a stereotype of something?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, to our knowledge, it's the first queer female story that's been told in this length of format in Canada. And it's so important to me to make sure that I'm being authentic and serving the communities that I'm representing on screen. And so every step of the way, we're always trying to include community members in every position, every role, like every single department. It was almost exclusively either BIPOC or LGBTQ2+ community members. And it was hard to do that. It's, you know, those two communities both are underrepresented everywhere. And so we had to give a lot of first chances to a lot of people. And the show was an ultra low budget. And I think that the quality of it doesn't read that way. And it, I think, has a lot to do with bringing that authenticity through the crew and the cast and everyone that we involved in, who really were passionate about the story, and they wanted to put in 110% because they cared about the story. And I think it just trickles down in every way to make sure you're representing the stories authentically, you know?
Yeah. Is that your dog?
Yeah, I'll go on mute.
Trying to get in on it.
Yeah.
Joseph, I'm totally fascinated because you will be our white token person on the panel today. You had this great idea. You go in, you're pitching Transplant. It's a very diverse story. What were there concerns from the people you were pitching to about how you would be able to authentically sort of create these characters? And you have a very strong female character also who's racially diverse on the show. But what was that like? Because you had, at least you had a history of success and people really knew you, but you were now pitching something very different.
Yeah, I certainly felt like with me and my creative partner at Sphere, our producer at the time, or still, but the producer that I originated the idea with, we knew that what we had was an idea, especially at the time we were pitching it in 2017. Then we knew that that it's the kind of thing that they might respond to at the broadcaster. We knew it was at the time an innovative idea, and it had a high concept, kind of adrenaline fueled premise that got it all going, and we were aware of that. And so, to be totally honest, we worked hard on the pitch. You know, we went to CTV, had a story that we were telling, and it was we worked hard on that. But once they said yes, which they did right away, we really felt that there was an onus on us to prove that we could tell this story from his point of view. And so, even though they put it into development, I really didn't. I just took it one script at a time and one moment at a time. And at the script stage, we had, I was sort of really starting with the perspective of the Syrian refugee. So, was very fortunate that there's been many more, but in those days, 2 recent Syrian refugees who were working with us and giving a lot of themselves to the story that we were trying to tell. And so it was just the DNA of their experience is all over our show,
Right.
everywhere. And so it was, so I just felt like if I can write a good pilot with all the input that I can find, and then I can write a good pilot that feels authentic to them and also happens to please the people who are going to pay for the show, we would just take it one step at a time. And, and that they've been, that sort of coalition of voices has grown in the time that we've been making the show. And so I just feel like we approached it, we took that very seriously from the beginning. We didn't feel we would do it unless we could, with people thinking that we were doing it well. And it's, if anything, we've only expanded our ability to have input as we've kind of made inroads with people who are seeing the show and coming to us and wanting to share their experiences, feedback, criticism, suggestions.
Did you find it challenging at all, though? Like when you were at the broadcast level and you're actually pitching the show, are they bringing up to you who are the diverse voices? Who are the writers you're going to bring in? Do they ask? They may not ask it at that stage, but did they? Or how are you getting the authenticity of this from those communities?
When I was pitching the show, I was referring to the sort of people whose lived experiences were collaborating with me at the time. And then from the very beginning, there was always the understanding that the room of writers would be diverse, and it was a television show is a labor of love for many people. So
Right.
There was always the idea from the beginning that although I had conceived of this concept and originated the ensemble characters, you know, in conjunction with a producer at Sphere, there was always the idea that we were then going to, you know, we were going to collect as many people as were willing to come along with us and try to tell these many stories.
On the journey. How did you find those? Because there's always people talking about it's hard to find those writers. It's hard to find those people to bring on. How were you able to pick and pull that writing room together?
You know, you read and meet as many people as you possibly can in the time window that you have. And the reality is, at the broadcast level, you work for years preparing your pitch. You work for years on your first episode, but then you have 3 months to get going, you know, so that's always the reality. And so we had a big room out of the gate, and we you know, we just interviewed, read, met with, reached out to as many people, those with experience and those without, you know, at least at least 3 of the people in our first year writers room had no real television experience. And we have only, I'd say, like, one of the things I'm really proud of is, you know, we're in our 3rd season and we've included a lot of writers, you know, and
Right.
Our process has grown to kind of meet and expand the show that we're writing. And it has continued to kind of grow and expand in terms of who we've added to the mix.
I love that, because the show's really great and audiences love it. And it leads me, RT, now to ask, and I'm going to be asking all of you too, when you were conceiving your shows, did you have an audience specific in mind? And was your idea that the audience should be very broad, or were you thinking, I want this niche audience here? What was going on with you, RT?
Yeah, I think, you know, in terms of Utopia Falls, you know, with that concept, I am making a broader based piece there for that. While the interesting thing about it is it's broad in its sort of scope. It's you know, it's a dystopian future kind of thing, so it's made for, I think, a lot of audiences to watch, but it's very specific in that it's science fiction hip hop, which is, you know, there's not a ton of those floating around. But I think I from the jump, because I was able to pitch the production company with just a purely original idea. I just thought of the young me, you know, a young, you know, teen of color out there trying to figure out who they are and loving certain things like science fiction and loving the music that they grow up to and what would they like to see. So I suppose if you think about it as being broad, sure, it's broad, but it's broad for you know, the entire BIPOC and LGBTQ plus community to see themselves. It's a show for people who don't get to see themselves in you know, the Hunger Games or some of those other things, and really see themselves as leaders in the show. That's who it's for.
But I'm interested too in your thinking. Were you also thinking we need to attract a white audience? Like, one, does that actually come into the thought process? And then talking about your show, The Porter, because that has a larger reach. Do you think those things too?
No, I don't really do. I don't, you know, here's the deal. You know, I've been watching television for my whole life, movies and television my whole life. And I'm not often represented in the movies that I watch and some of the stuff that I love, you know. I'm not a gangster. You know, I watch Goodfellas and The Godfather and that's not my culture, but I find myself in those stories as well. I think the greatest universal stories are human. And so I don't, you know, when I look to create things or develop things or produce things, I'm not thinking, oh, well, I'm going to make this for this specific audience, which might be me or people like me. Yes, I think that first, because I want to make things for people who don't get to see themselves. But in that, I'm not necessarily thinking, well, I also need to make it accessible to a white audience. a white audience should be like me. They should be able to see themselves in anything. And I hope that they can, because it's very strange if they can't. I don't know. I mean, a lot of my white friends can absolutely see themselves in a lot of the work that I see, or that I love, or that I create, whether the leads are white or not. And I think everybody should be able to. So it's not, I wouldn't, it's not really a consideration for me. I don't look to try to make it extra inclusive and make sure that I cater to a certain audience. I think it's the audience that I have first in my head. That's who I want it to be for. And then I hope that the people who are white that are watching can come along for the ride and see themselves in it somehow.
But do you think the broadcasters are thinking this?
I'm sure the broadcasters are thinking. I'm sure they are, but I also think that if you're lucky enough to get to the stage where you're actually in production and you're moving forward, hopefully you have expressed the things that you think are important. They've expressed the things that they think are important, and you've reached some kind of a common ground to move forward. If you find that you're always sort of fighting with somebody to try to make sure that it's accessible, or that it's that the culture that's on display, like one of the things in Porter that we teamed with BT, as you know, and BT was like, one of the first meetings they had is like, we don't want to black-splain anything. We don't want to explain parts of the culture built into the dialogue and exposition. These people should just be living. This is how they're living. And if you're not, caught up on it, then catch up, do your own homework. And I think it was it was great to hear that from a broadcaster who just was like, this is for the audience that it is, and the other people can come along for the ride, and they will catch up if they're interested. And I love that sentiment. It's kind of funny because there was a discussion still about whether we'd put subtitles on the patois, which I found, and that came from them. But yeah, I think audiences nowadays are sophisticated. And at least we want sophisticated audiences to be watching this stuff. So the hope is that you don't have to bend over backwards to cater to an audience that,
I just have to say, I loved that you have patois in the Porter, and I was jumping for joy when I saw that, and I'm not even Jamaican, but I was just like, oh my God, yes.
To finally hear it, yeah.
Now, for you, Mary, what was that like? I mean, were you thinking of audience? APTN has a very specific audience. Is that specific audience welcoming of queer stories, for one? So did they have to think about that?
Definitely my target audience is the queer community, Indigenous and queer people. And when those two mesh together, but yeah, we've had some homophobia pop up on APTN's social medias, and it's called Querencia, and the log line has the word queer in it. And we had someone just comment you can't say queer, oh, sorry.
The dog's protecting you. Yeah, you should get to say.
I raised my voice a little bit. He's like, what's happening? Come here, Yogs. But yeah, someone tried to tell APTN on their platform it's really homophobic to use the word queer, and I commented, I'm actually I created the show, and this is coming from me, we've reclaimed the word queer in the LGBTQ2+ community. So there's always going to be a little bit of needing to educate people, and I also think RT I will make it for the people that I want to make it for, and hope that a broader audience will discover it, and they have. And there's been people who are parents of queer children or something who've watched it and been like, Oh, thank you, like, so much for, like, giving me this little, like, insight on what it is to be queer, like, and we've had, people not involved in the Indigenous or queer community watch it and connect to it, um, and I think to me, that's the exciting part, is to tell a story that is so specific and so unique and so true to me as a storyteller, that I do believe that, like, I aim for targeting this small group and it will trickle out and, like, just sort of resonate wider than if I were to try to please, like, a huge audience. I probably would please none of them. So, yeah.
But you know what? APTN has probably um, enlarged their audience. There's probably a queer community that came to APTN when they would not normally have. So that has probably helped.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's gotten a really great response in general.
And Joseph, because you had worked on so many series before, is that a foremost thing? Because even when you said before, when we came up with this idea, we knew it would be, are you thinking audience, too, when you're coming up with these, creating these ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I kind of occupy both spaces that have been discussed. I totally agree in like universality of specificity. So our show is grounded by a person's very unique experience, but I always felt from the beginning that that Transplant, by staying true to its nature, is a show that will have wide audience appeal, because it's and I always say this, it's about starting over, it's about second chances, it's about, and so if you live in that space, there's it's a very simple universal theme. Your life hits a wall and you take another shot. So we always felt if we ground the show in a character who can convey that specific experience in his own life in a real way, as specifically as possible, then that as a platform for theme will just reverberate. And I also knew Hamza, who was basically attached to the show early on. I mean, he's a unbelievably charismatic performer, and so when you're anchoring a show with an actor like that, I believed audiences would respond. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. The three of you, what's nice is there are shows that really speak to that particular culture or a gender specific, but something like yours, Joseph. What I love too is it's a story where, well, maybe other than the Syrian person, but they could all be interchangeable. They really, and that's really a lot of our life too. We don't, all people of color, we don't walk around in our cultural spaces. People are doctors and they're lawyers, and they're just people that just happen to be. And I think that's what's great about the show too. It's showing everyday people. They just happen to look a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the audience is craving that as well.
Yeah. I think that we were sort of tried to be inspired by or moved by the intersectionality of people who are starting over, people who don't quite feel like they fit in wherever you are in your life or wherever you come from, and just to try to ground that and let that as a concept generate the stories. And that was at the heart of the show. So I guess I felt like if we could do that well, then audiences would find it or come to it, and we were going to do it the way we wanted to either way, whether they came or not. So, and I'm proud of that.
Okay, I want to get to the part that's about funding, because funding is always crucial. And, there's been a lot of discussion about a lot of work that is specific to certain cultures, certain races tend to not get the kind of budgets that a lot of what we call mainstream, meaning shows more for a white audience, would get. And RT, what was that like? Especially you were making a sci-fi. I'm sure in your mind you had a budget you wanted, and then there was a budget you ended up with, and you had to make that work.
And the two were absolutely not the same. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of known to do ambitious things sometimes. This was one of the more ambitious ideas that I had, and yeah, to do a science fiction series, the scope of what I have imagined was much greater than what we were able to actually put on screen. But and the budget that we received. But look, I mean, you work with what you're given sometimes. Especially, it was my first series as a creator, so and I come from music video world, which is, you make magic with a bucket of chicken and some friends, with cameras. So we went to bat. Hulu gave us a large chunk of the budget, and then CBC came in for another chunk, and we produced a series for that. And just in like I said, in the way that you do, you call on your good friends to make you look good, who are really talented, and we had a wonderful cast and great production collaborators.
Now, with the Porter, though, do you find that for a show of that stature, do you feel that the budget was what you needed? I mean, who needs? Everybody always needs more money, but did you feel like yes?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of a Canadian budget for the Porter, we were pretty healthy. We got a decent sized budget for this country. So CBC came through and delivered. And again, BT helped us out with that. If you're talking about American series budgets, well, that's a whole other echelon. We definitely could have used the money as well. We're doing a historical drama, and having to recreate entire neighborhoods, and again, a scope of a show that travels from Canada, Montreal, all the way down to Chicago, New York. So yeah, the scope of something like that is huge. You can't just turn the camera a little bit to this side, because then everything's modern. So you definitely have those troubles. Look, I mean, it's not a secret that a lot of shows and movies that are headed by or created by people of color, writers of color, that star people of color, traditionally have not gotten a lot of those big budgets. And I think it's kind of this old myth that's hanging around. And I'm hoping that it's slowly dying, but this idea that content that features us does not sell well in white markets. But I firmly believe that that's because in the past, maybe they weren't employing the right people that could sell this product, that could speak to the cultural nuances, and that could speak to the universality of these projects. And so they were just kind of handing them over to whoever used to do their sales and sell other types of projects. And I think that has to evolve, and the most obvious thing that changed that was, something like Black Panther, which was like an incredibly universally well-received product, but is very specific. I mean, Marvel did their thing with it. And I don't mean just production wise. I do mean that in the promotion of the show, they really engaged people in every community that they went to. They had, African fashion shows and went to community radio to speak about the project, to penetrate into those communities. And I think those are really vital strategies for people as we move into an era where we're telling very diverse stories, is to diversify our marketing strategies to make sure that this stuff penetrates and gets to the people that will see it. That's a major component and a need.
Do you think Canadian broadcasters understand that they are looking at that and understanding that marketing has got to be different?
I don't think so. And I think in general, the industry has not quite caught up. I think they see one thing happen, they go, oh, maybe everything's changed, and not realizing that the change has to also happen internally with them, right? And so I think it will be an ongoing process as more and more people of color get to create series and bring series. that, a real collaboration on the marketing has to happen, and in diving into these communities. So it's not there yet by a long shot, but it needs to happen if it's going to be successful.
And Mary, how did you find, because you said you were working with a small budget, but do you feel that it will grow in time, or do you feel like I have to come up with a different idea, like to be able to work on something?
Well, for season 1, it was ultra low budget, and we kind of scrimped together pennies basically for the amount of content that we created, and called in all of the favors we possibly could. And for season 2, Jesse and I went to APTN and we're like, okay, we're gonna go bigger. We're gonna need more money, and our goal is to make this a tier A show now. We've shown you what we can do with no money. Imagine what we can do with like quadruple or more of the money, way more than that even. But and they were like, okay, yeah, we believe in it. We believe in the show. And so we're now approaching other broadcasters with APTN support to try and get season 2 funded past APTN's abilities, because they're the Indigenous broadcasters of Canada. They've always been under funded, and they can't afford the level of a show that we are going to create for season 2. And I have a great piece of content that I can show and be like, here's the abilities, and now we need to not pay people under scale and like call in all the favors, because I'll do that once, but I won't keep doing that. And I know my worth, and I know this story really well, and I know that there's an audience for it. So it's really just we're in the period of transitioning over to being a higher tier show, and so far APTN has been such a huge advocate for us too. And so it's just like knowing when to be humble and be like, okay, I'll do this for nothing, but then knowing when to be like, and now it's time for me to get paid and make money.
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting because I've been in the industry a long time and watched a lot of people, and we've lost so much great talent because, especially in the world of Black, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, you can only do free and really low budget for so long. And then they tend to get in relationships, they get kids, they get mortgage, they drop out because you can't even sustain any kind of a life.
Or they go stateside.
Yeah, and they go stateside. As I sit in my Los Angeles home, and it's the only way. But Joseph, of the shows you did, do you feel, was the budget comparable, or do you feel it was different because the subject matter was more diverse? Like, I'm always interested in these hard questions, by the way.
I mean, I would say something similar to what RT said about Porter. I mean, I'm not complaining about the money that they spend per episode on our show. I think it's in the Canadian space for what that kind of network procedural costs is what we cost, but a television show is like, you're a goldfish and you fit the size of the pond that you're in. So,
right.
We're trying to figure it out this week, and it's like, based on the show we want to write, we're 20% short, so we're always trying to expand to fill the space. But I say that with incredible, I want to be very gracious with the amount of money that we have here to make this show. I think it's kind of amazing. And so people both at CTV and at Universal who are, to whatever extent those people are going out of pocket to pay for the show, I think is remarkable, because it's a good amount of money.
No, that's fantastic. But you found that that's still the same, that kind of budget is the same as other shows that weren't as diverse. Do you feel it's the same, or do you feel
of the Canadian shows that I've worked on, this is the most expensive significantly.
Oh, wow.
The biggest budget significantly. Yeah.
But that's really great news to hear. That really is. I know that Netflix was boasting about Bridgerton and how that is like their biggest show that's on Netflix right now. And I think it's great for all of us to keep reminding. There's an article, I don't have it here, that was last year. They did do research in Hollywood that diverse content, diverse films, these shows are actually bringing in more money, like not just additional more money. They are the bigger watch shows, they're the bigger funders, and yet I think we could have that in Canada, but I'm not quite sure broadcasters are on board yet with the understanding of that. I think they still think these a show like yours, Mary, and yours are more for a niche audience. I don't think yet they're understanding that it's really going to expand their audience. So RT, now that let's talk about like the porter that you're doing, because this really is all about women and the depiction of women. And all of you, I'm sure, grew up with certain images of the depiction. I know I did. Women were always the, on the arm of, or the, the best friend of, somebody, and not really the lead. And then I feel we went through a moment where the lead women were just men. They just wrote them as men, but they were women. Right. So, because I would sit there watching going, why would I go down that dark alleyway? Why would I try and beat up that guy who lives 5 times my size? Like, I think it was still men reinventing what women are. So RT, getting back to that, because the porter has Utopia did, and the porter has some very strong women. How do you make sure that they are not just men in women's clothing?
Well, look, I mean, I can't really claim very much in terms of the porter, in terms of the writing. We have 2 wonderful women showrunners,
Marcia Green and Marie Murray.
Yeah. So, I mean, the story is very much, comes from their heart and their spirit, and especially, the characters that they've written. So, Marlene and Lucy and Queenie and Faye are all very rich and interesting and diverse women with different desires and needs and flaws, and they're beautifully, beautifully written and completely separate from each other. So, I mean, all I can say is that, find the right people to team with.
That's right.
If you don't got the chops yourself, and reap the benefits, it's been a really beautiful collaboration to work with them, and then and also to give my perspective of the women in my life, and my mother and my wife and great friends as well. So just but yeah, make sure.
I was going to say, from a director's perspective, then on that, you're getting this amazing content written by the showrunners of the show and the actresses that are there. Do you feel there's a difference? Can you sense a difference in the quality of the depiction of these women than things you've directed before?
I mean, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, even since it's, 2 Black women as the showrunners for our show, and again, it's the nuance, and it's the sort of like, you're seeing people in these characters. You're seeing family. There's a shorthand to some of these things as you work with it, and then again, working with really talented, incredible actresses who breathe even more life into this stuff, and as a male director, sort of like step back and kind of like see this happening in front of you, and see the touches that people bring to the characters and the questions that they have. It's also an education. I mean, I say, Alfre Woodard, it was like a masterclass. Just watching her, relating to her, getting to direct her, and being in conversation with her. So yeah, it's I feel like I'm sitting here claiming things. I'm not claiming anything. These are beautiful, beautifully talented women who filled our stories with just incredible nuance and just very unique perspective. So it was amazing.
And Mary, what's wonderful is as a woman, you were creating, but like, did you find there was eventually, because you're an actress also. So before you created the show, you're an actress, and going out for the auditions that you were going out for was part of your creating the show, the frustration of what you saw and what you saw, the content you saw and what you were, going out for?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even I'll just take it back a step and say, I refer to myself as an actor, because I feel like adding the S on the end is like we don't call female doctors doctresses, like they're doctors. We're
So true.
So I just try to take things right down to the fine details. Sorry, I think there's someone walking in the hall. My dog is just desperate to be in this panel. It might be the roommate coming home, but no, sorry, to bring it back.
No, but you're right. Getting it out of, male, female, whatever, for just actor is an actor,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and just the representation of that.
Yeah, for sure. And like the reason I ever started writing was because when I graduated acting school, I did 2 years intensive acting program. I got out and I was like, I'm ready for like juicy roles. And then I'm getting like cast in or auditioned for like party girl #1 or like the girlfriend of the main man who does all these fun things. And she's just like a damsel in distress and like just like one-dimensional and like not very exciting roles for an actor who wants to like sink their teeth into something fun and juicy and new. And so I started writing because I just saw that need, and I was like, like, man, like there's just like not a lot of characters that I'm really excited about that I'm getting put up for even, and definitely not getting cast in. And so I guess I'll take it upon myself and like what kind of characters do I want to play? And then I just got the writer's bug, and then I got the director's bug because I wanted to make sure that what I was writing was being put on screen in the way that I envisioned it. And now I've got the showrunner bug, and it's just like our stories really have a different take on them when they are told by us, and or when there's people in powerful positions like your showrunners. Like that's so important that we make sure that female voices are being heard and being uplifted, because it's still next to impossible for me to get a TV directing gig as a female, Indigenous, queer like person. Like I don't feel like really take the risk. And so I'm like out here making my own TV series, and I'm gonna direct it and like all these things. And it's like it shouldn't be that hard for a woman in film, but it still is. And so I'm gonna be creating opportunities for other females in film. I'm gonna hire other women creatives in the lead positions because it's just still so underrepresented. It's kind of like ridiculous.
No, it really is crazy. And you made some really great and really important points there. And Joseph, in the women that on your show, because they're strong, they're wonderful, but had you growing up watching, did you have a sense of there must be more to these women characters? Were you drawn to creating characters that could be more multidimensional?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I want them all to be multidimensional, and so I had personally some ideas about who the female characters were going to be in the pilot of the show, and I think I started with a strong sense of who they were, but I will say that I'm surrounded by a lot of extremely talented female writers, and so I'm it's once again, it's just a huge collaboration of people's ideas. And
but I meant even you growing up, the content that you were watching on TV yourself as a young man and growing up, were there characters that you were just like, oh, this is pathetic, or these are great, and did that inspire you to want to make that kind of content where you could spotlight women in this way?
I think yes, there would be examples of both. But when I was when I was trying to, yeah, I mean, I'm drawn to complex characters all the time, you know, so so that's what I want to do, you know, whatever their background. And so, yeah, I mean, are we trying to go against type in any way? I don't think so. We're just trying to tell stories about real people that have emotional stories that people can relate to and not always have to like, but understand, you know, not
Right.
always have to just be able to follow because they feel with them. And so me and my collaborators were just starting with, you know, with personalities that we were engaged with and just trying to follow them, you know, and became with all of our characters, it's a reciprocal relationship with us, the writers, with the actor who plays them, you know, with material and how we put it out into the world, get the feedback that we get, relate to it and move forward. And we're just trying to follow, what I say to all the writers is we're just trying to follow the character. And that's a collaboration between the writers and the actor.
Yeah, speaking of the actors, 'cause actors, I mean, actors are going to be key to any of these roles. And, you know, a lot of times when I've looked at budgets for productions, especially in Canada, the actors amount seems like an afterthought as opposed to the larger part of your budget. I mean, the success of your show is going to a lot of times be made or broken on the actor who's in that role. And so, um, Joseph, when you worked with a casting director, obviously, and you probably were they able to bring the names, and I mean names that audiences might recognize, to the table, or was it more looking for new, unheard of people?
We definitely saw a range of names because we were casting like a network procedural, so we saw everybody. But other than we went with the best actor for the part in every instance, the one that we responded to emotionally, you know.
Right.
So I mean, Hamza was part of it from very early on because he and I have a relationship. But no, we weren't influenced by. Yes, we had access to all those names, and we responded. We took a very long time to cast our leads. We were right up to a few days before production, really, and putting stress on a lot of people with some of those parts. But we tried really hard and went with who we thought was the right actor for every part.
How did the casting director, because sometimes casting directors don't have a roster or have an understanding of a lot of those more racially diverse actors that are out there. So did they have to try a different route? Or probably not the traditional route. Not all those actors have agents, because a lot of those agencies only keep one or two actors of color in their sort of
We
their.
on our show, whether it was for the leads or whether it's for the guest stars, because we're a big ensemble and we try to tell stories for people coming from lots of walks in life in every episode. Our casting directors in Montreal and Toronto are very regularly asked to go into the community and find either actors who can't otherwise reach casting directors, or to find non-actors, or to find people who want to be actors. So we're doing that all the time.
That's fantastic. And RT, I saw you shaking, but when you were working with casting directors, have you found, well, first of all, most of our casting directors aren't even diverse, like in Canada.
Yes. Yes.
So
Very true.
plug for Reelworld. We are actually training casting directors right now. So we'll
Vital.
more about that later. But how was it for you, Utopia Falls? Like, who went out there and found that talent for you? And was it just you?
No. I mean, I mean, listen, again, when you get a chance to do this for your first time, you got to look to, the people that have come before you, and reach out, so I hit up, Suds, Jen Holness, Clement Virgo. I hit up the people that had, headed up shows before me to see who they used, all of those things. And you just have to do that. You got to reach out and try to, and knowing what you're up against, at the time, Utopia was like, we had the, nothing made me happier than seeing our cast wall. We had the most, diverse cast that I'd ever seen in a show that I'd worked on. So, you have to reach out and try to find the people that know how to do that. You talk to a lot of people and you make sure that that they actually do these things. So, going out into communities, you're looking for young people, for instance, on our show, young, diverse people who can also sing and dance. You got to hit the theater circuit, and if a casting director is not, they don't really do that, then that's not the person to go with, and similarly so with the porter. It's somebody who has very good relationships in the Black community and knows about stage and screen actors from that community, and you make sure you reach out. And then the last part is then you reach out to the people that you do. Some of these people might not be, some of them might be singers and not even have an acting agent, but you sort of put your feelers out there and try to cast the net as wide as you can possibly cast. But it's kind of goes back to what I was saying, even with the marketing side. It's just, you got to try new strategies. You got to dig in different ways, and you can't fall back on, maybe you're lucky enough to find a production partner that, thinks your idea is good. Great, but it can't stop there. You can't rely on just their resources, if you want to be successful. So.
Mary, was it hard, you auditioning? Did you have to reject yourself in that?
I got the call back. I was so excited.
Call back.
No, we didn't even have the money to hire a casting director. So me and my producer were the casting directors, and I was really interested in the undiscovered actors out there. So we accepted a tape from every single person who submitted, and I watched them all, and there were hundreds, and I almost lost my mind doing it. But
I love that. But APTN themselves probably had some people that, were they able to suggest people too, or?
No, they were really hands off. They were just like, here's money, go make a thing. And so it was great.
Come back when you got it.
Yeah, exactly. But no, we just put out breakdowns on Actors Access. And we actually had an issue with it because they don't have options for other genders other than cisgenders in casting. And we have roles and characters that can be any gender, and they can be trans and non-binary and all sorts of things. So we would write in the description any gender, but we had to select male or female. So it would look like August, male, any gender. And it was no, that's wrong. We're not, we don't need that other part of it. And
that is an interesting point. I didn't recognize that. So is that something that you're trying to get changed on that?
Yeah, I was in a long email exchange with people at Actors Access about it, and they just kind of gave me the runaround. And next time we're going to be bringing our business to casting workbook, because they actually do have more inclusive languaging around their gender specifications. But it's, I just ended up, when I shared the casting calls, I screenshot the breakdowns and posted it to my social media, and just whited out the part that had the cisgender role descriptions on there. And because we were looking for an indigiqueer actor, and I wanted an actually indigiqueer actor, we had to share it to our social medias in a not so stereotypical way, because the Indigenous community is really small and tight-knit in the film industry. And we knew there was going to be a new actor out there for the lead role of Dega that we just hadn't heard of yet. And we found her, but it took a lot, and just word of mouth was really helpful.
Wow. This is something new. I love it. This is going to be our new cause at Reelworld. We're going to get you those changes on those platforms.
Thank you. Yes.
I can't thank you guys enough. This has been, oh, poor Mary's probably gone back to her dog again. We're going to do the next panel just on Mary's dog. But thank you so much for taking this time. Joseph, you are a trooper. We really appreciate it. RT, thank you so much for being here. And it's just it's really helpful for a lot of the people that watch to really have a deeper understanding of how you actually create these characters and how you navigate in bringing them on and bringing them to life and bringing them to an audience. And kudos to all of you, because you are in a small percentage of people, forget just Canada, anywhere in the world, that is getting content made and getting it out there. And you're doing a fabulous job, and we thank you all. And so thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Chika. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. It was a real honor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tonya. Appreciate you.